Got 20 seconds. Come on, man, go.
Keep moving. Good. Get those knees up. Explode. Good. Explode. Let's go. Up.
Rock forward. Let's go. One more. Go.
You are listening to the Fight Strength Podcast with your hosts, Phil Daru and Jason Burgos.
Hello again, fighting and fitness fans, and welcome to an all-new episode of the Fight Strength Podcast. I am Jason Burgos, and with me, as always, is my co-host, the very talented, the very muscular, and the very bearded strength and conditioning coach to the stars of American Top Team. He is the Phil Daru. Phil, how are you?
Man, I'm doing well with that intro. I like it. I feel like we became closer in bonding.
We're bonding?
Yes, definitely. You're understanding my approaches. I know how you get under my skin, but you also make me feel better. So we have, kind of like a push and pull concept going on.
There you go. You gotta love hate. You gotta toughness with some love. You hurt me when you didn't agree that you liked Limp Bizkit, but then we worked and found out that you liked The Rock. We're bonding. We're like brothers now. It's off to the races from here on out.
I just got to give you tough love from the beginning, man. That's how I roll, right?
I totally understand. Now, on this week's episode, we are very fortunate to have one of the leading minds in the study of sports science. He is a professor, a PhD, and a strength and conditioning coach as well. He is Dr. Andy Galpin. Expect to have some serious knowledge dropped on you by the good doctor a little later in the show. But first, always remember you can check out our previous episodes with names like Dean Thomas, Dr. Corey Peacock, Valerie Eterno, King Mo. You can do this by finding us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and YouTube. You can check out all those episodes and enjoy them. A lot of great information, a lot of fun stuff. Please go check it out. Remember to review us, give us some ratings, give us some feedback. We want to know what you guys think of the show. We appreciate all the stuff. But, however, first up tonight is our Ask Daru segment, so Phil can drop a bit of strength training knowledge on you first. Now, our first question is from Aparam from Chicago. He asks, what are some good exercises for cardio besides jogging and biking? He wants to keep going strong and not gas out. Don't we all?
Yeah. So you first have to understand or see what you're trying to accomplish from an aerobic standpoint. I think he's primarily talking about aerobic capacity, but there's other aerobic systems in any sport. And we're talking about anaerobic, lactic, and like we talked about before on later shows. But so for instance, like for, let's say anaerobic, we would do some sprint intervals with either, you can do it with a prowler, a sled, you can do it by yourself. You can do HIIT cardio, which we'll talk about in the next question, where that basically means you're going to be doing high intensity intervals, and you would stop pretty much you would go as hard as you possibly can for a set amount of time, and then you would rest and repeat, for a set amount of reps or a set amount of sets. Now, after that, like let's say lactic conditioning, we would do something like a circuit style where you do 1 minute, maybe 30 to 1 minute intervals of each exercise. And then you could do that for around 10 to 20 minutes even, just to build up that lactic capacity and that lactic threshold. And that'll help them pretty much get in good condition.
Interesting. Now, for our next question, Ryan from Charlotte asks, what is your opinion on Tabata training, aka burpees? I have a local BJJ tournament in 5 weeks and have been doing this Tabata style conditioning for 2 weeks, but I don't feel the difference. How often should I do this? And which one is your favorite sumo? Which one is your favorite, sumo or conventional? Could you explain for the people that don't know, what is Tabata or burpees? What are these things?
Okay, so Tabata training is a form of HIIT cardio or HIIT training, which is a high-intensity interval. Usually you would do 20 seconds on and 10 seconds off of work, and you can do this for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. Now, this can be, anything. It doesn't have to just be burpees, and I'll get into a rant about my burpees situation in a minute. But it can be anything from a rower machine. It can be anything like, you can even do sprint intervals with that on Tabata. You can do, whatever it is that makes you able to do work for 20 seconds and then 10 seconds off. And even you can flip that and do 10 seconds on and 20 seconds off.
What if it's like eating a sandwich for 20 seconds? I mean, that's hard work.
You're going hardcore Tabata eating burgers and fries if you want.
Bologna and cheese Tabata, that's next level.
That is next level.
Well, continue. I broke your thought. I'm sorry about that. Continue.
Yeah, so anyways, but, as far as burpees go, burpees are basically, it more mainly is crucial in the CrossFit world. Basically, you're falling to the floor and picking yourself back up, consecutively. And if you do it in a CrossFit realm, they do it for time or for reps. But basically what you're doing is you're putting the shoulder girdle in a bad position, especially when you're trying to do it as fast as possible. It's almost like if you played football, it's like an up down in football. But I don't feel it's conducive for sports performance. I don't feel it's very safe for general public to do. So I don't think there's really any real point in time you should be doing a burpee whatsoever. So take that out of your whole, schedule, repertoire, whatever you want to call it, your routine. I think that if you want to do something, you can do something like thrusters or kettlebell swings or even, a hang clean, something like that that's going to get your body fully working other than a straight burpee. Now, as far as my favorite deadlift, it really just depends. I mean, I sumo now, but I used to pull conventional. It really depends on your femur length. It depends on your style, your mobility and your hips. But if you want to get, if you're trying to get stronger from a full body perspective, trying to work on posterior chain strength, conventional will be better because it does hit more of that posterior chain, where the sumo will be more quad dominant and hip dominant. So it really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Now, you mentioned like kettlebells and another exercise. Like, are there a bunch, like maybe do you have like 5 recommended exercises for someone that is doing Tabata training, that are, it's like really good, strong exercises to build a good conditioning for, like, for example, this person has a tournament coming up, to get them really going into it, like peaking, like an MMA fighter would? Yeah,
I mean, Tyron Woodley actually does this. He'll do sets of 10 with 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off of the either the Versa climber or the Airdyne bike. Now, these are something that you want to do, obviously, closer to your time of your competition, because it is so high intense and you don't want to do it for a long duration. Remember that time we were talking about periodization and getting them down and peaking them for their competition or fight. Mm-hmm. So, but definitely, yeah, I would do around 8 to 10 sets of 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off of an Airdyne bike or a Versa climber. And you would do that about 2 or 3 times a week, depending on, how conditioned you actually are and your recovery rate.
With the Ask Daru segment in the bag, it is now time to bring on our guest. He has a PhD in human bioenergetics and is currently a professor at Cal State-Fullerton, where he is passing on his impressive knowledge at his biochemistry and molecular exercise physiology laboratory. He's a frequent guest on the very popular Barbell Shrugged podcast, and he has also made the transition into using his deep understanding of human skeletal muscles as a strength coach for MMA fighters like Dennis Bermudez, Jake Ellenberger, and Patrick Cummins. He is Dr. Andy Galpin, and we are very grateful to have him here tonight. Dr. Galpin, thank you for coming on the show.
Pleasure to be here, guys.
All right, now should I call you Doctor or should I call you Andy? Let's get this.
Andy's plenty good, man.
All right, Andy. So anyways, since you're well versed in that science side and you have that meathead backside to it, let people know a little bit about yourself and how you got started in strength and conditioning and what led you to the pursuit of your PhD.
It's funny because a lot of us that are at this category or in this field have a very similar background, which is we were pretty decent athletes, but not terrible to where there was no incentive, but not good enough to where like the details mattered. So, I was a pretty decent high school athlete. I played college football. And then after that, I started competing in Olympic weightlifting. And then from there, of course, found jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, and MMA and stuff. So my whole life was athletics, and I just had that perfect, I guess, balance of lack of athleticism and just enough athleticism to like, need to study it to a level so that I could actually, because that little bit of difference between training properly and training maybe okay but not optimally was the difference between me being on the field or not, or being all conference or not. So that's really what got me into it.
Nice. Now, I heard you're doing a lot of crazy research over there at the university. Can you at least explain to me what's going on at the moment, especially with that muscle biopsy testing? Because I really am interested into that.
Yeah, the whole point of my lab is, I see myself as a strength guy first. I'm an athlete. I'm a strength and conditioning person. But when I started going through school and when I got my master's degree, I started to realize that there was all these questions that practitioners knew, like this type of training will get you strong, but not muscle mass. And this type of training will get you fast, but not powerful. Or, all these little nuances that strength coaches knew and that I knew, but like we didn't understand really why. And by why, I mean physiologically why or how. And so I was like, I want to learn the other end of the spectrum here so that I could take that deeper level of science, that molecular biology stuff, and start to explain training adaptations. So, my area is to take all those practical questions that every one of us have, like why does this guy respond better to this type of training? Or why is it when you give the same athletes the same training program, one of them recovers faster than the other? And so in order to answer those questions, we take a giant needle and we go into people's muscle, and we grab a bunch of muscle and pull it out, and then we study. We go over to my chemistry labs and use our big fancy lasers and stuff, and we study the muscle at its all the way down to its cellular, molecular, and genetic level.
Man, that's awesome, man. So
it's pretty great. It's pretty fun.
That's something that's. Would you say that's pretty much groundbreaking right now at this point? Because I don't think anybody else is really doing that.
People do it, but for clinical settings, diabetes, cancer research. But there's very, very few of us that actually do it for the sake of sport performance. And I don't know anyone who's doing it in combat sports besides myself. It's a difficult thing to do, and I spent a lot of years building infrastructure so that it could happen.
Yeah, if I were fighting again, 2 or 3 years ago, I'd definitely come hit you up, that. And we talked about bringing King Mo out there, maybe pretty soon too, to see what's going on with him, because he's a genetic freak in his own right. Now I've
heard stories about that dude, so I've heard some impressive stuff about.
Listen, it's serious, man. Now that we got everything squared away, he's gonna be doing big things. But let's talk a little bit now about like what I mentioned in several times earlier in the shows. That mixed martial arts is basically a mixed aerobic system sport. There's a bunch of bioenergetic demands of that sport itself. Can you explain to the viewers or the listeners exactly what human bioenergetics actually is?
So it's really just a study of how your body produces energy or creates energy. And I focus on it from the muscles perspective for the most part. But really all we're talking about is how we use our system optimizes production of energy, and at the same time optimizes how we handle or deal with the waste products. And oftentimes, especially in a sport like MMA, it's actually more of the bigger deal is handling the waste products than it is generating energy. That's the thing that makes people gas. It's not the fact, you guys have been in the training halls and you've seen even your athletes, and I won't make you name names, but your athletes that quote unquote have bad cardio. Like they can train for hours. They can do rounds of sparring, and then they get into a fight and you're like, how did you gas in 4 minutes? Mm-hmm. So that's not a very good explanation. I was like, oh, it's their cardio's bad. That's a complete lack of understanding of what's actually happening. What's happening is they have a hard time dealing with the metabolic waste products that's being built up. So what you have to do is engineer either an improvement in recovery for them, or push them into the ways that you generate energy that actually produce less waste. And that's what bioenergetics really comes into sport performance. And honestly, it's one of those classic examples of people who know a little bit of physiology, maybe they have an undergraduate degree or they've been paying attention or something, almost get themselves into more trouble than the people who don't know anything about the field and just kind of came in. Because you can be severely misled by the classic textbook stuff, because that's just not how it works in these monster athletes.
Yeah, it's totally different from being in a classroom setting to making practical application into these athletes as fighters, because they're totally different from a mental standpoint as well.
And you have to understand that how you train energetically is actually far different from how they compete most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So like you work with some high level dudes dudes and girls, but for the most part, most MMA athletes are doing 15 minutes, right? 3 5-minute rounds.
Mm-hmm.
But if you only prepare them to do 15 minutes of work,
exactly,
they're going to get killed in training, because their training is so much different. They're training for hours a day. So that's another thing that people don't pay attention to energetically is, yes, you do only need to be able to go 3 5-minute rounds. But if that's all you can do in practice, you're going to get smoked. You're going to get hurt, because I guarantee you're doing more than that in a day in practice. So that's another
so how do you
people got to pay attention.
So how do you feel about let's say this? So how do you feel about when you're peaking a fighter for a fight, let's say, and they have a 5-minute round fight? Do you go over that time limit? Do you do, let's say, 8 5-minute rounds to overload the system, or do you make sure that they are doing exactly those 5 5s so that they can have the right amount of energy for that specific timeline in the fight? That makes sense?
Well, yeah, totally makes sense. I mean, we've had this. That's a perfect example. Literally tonight, Dennis Bermudez fights, and this is a huge problem with Dennis. Is he loves to do that same thing. It's like, I'm fighting 3 rounds. I want to be prepared to do 6 rounds. It's like, okay, great. But what the downside of that is you don't understand the true pace that those 3 5-minute rounds happen. So you tend to start slow.
Exactly.
Right. And that's a real problem. And so this is years ago now. But one of the times when Kevin came out, and he was maybe 2 weeks out, and it was like, all right, I want you to do, all we're doing is warming up, and you're doing 3 5-minute rounds. That's it.
Exactly.
And we're going to cycle in a new guy every round. And the guys were pros, but they weren't, top 5 UFC guys, top 5 in his weight class. And he was just destroying these people. And he got done with his minutes, and he's like, this is so easy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, now you can actually increase your workload, or you can handle the stresses that come on fight day, because your nerves get higher and all that stuff. So I guess my answer to your question, dude, is I think you should do a little bit of both, and you should partition it throughout camp. So if we look at what Joel Jameson does with Demetrius Johnson and stuff, you're going to have some workouts during the week where you're going to do like an extra round or 2, but those are for the sake of conditioning and for movement and to feel good and to work on stuff. But when you have that day when it's, hey, this is a simulated fight day or whatever, this is a simulated 15, like you're going in and you're going hard. And I want you to feel what that 15 minutes looks like, so that you don't finish that 3 rounds and go, well, I feel good, like I got more in the tank.
Yeah.
That's not what we want you out, because you should have been more active.
Yeah, as we get closer to the fight, specificity becomes key, especially, time frame of the fight itself, so the pace can be, right on point. So I understand what you're talking about. I just wanted to get that. I wanted to get your thought on it, but I definitely understand what you're talking about, and I'm glad that you are saying what I wanted to hear.
Yep.
On Barbell Shrugged, you talked about how if you are a younger athlete in your teens or 20s, you can get away with the higher levels of training and handle the physical demands it causes. Could you explain why, when an athlete nears their 30s, while still physically capable to do serious training, why rest and moderation becomes so much more important than when they were younger? Is there like a clear, and maybe you found in your studies, a clear difference in the physiology of how we change as an athlete changes as they get older?
Yeah, and the age of 30 is just totally arbitrary. So it really depends on training age. So some of these dudes who started wrestling when they were 5, I mean, they're broke by the time they're 27, 28, and they're just hanging on. But some of them, they didn't start till they're 16. By the time they're 30, they're fine. So it's just a round number. But to your point, what happens often in these folks is it's not the metabolic issue that's the problem. It's the joints, it's the ligaments, it's the bones that they haven't taken care of, because no one ever taught them proper movement. And they were so concerned with outcome, which is like, did you win, or did you get the barbell up? Did you get a new PR? and they were less concerned with movement quality when they were younger and when they first started competing. And so that will eventually get you, and that'll burn years at the end of your career. So, I mean, this is one of the things that I preach is whenever I get a new fighter or a younger fighter, I'm like, it's not about right now. Like, it's not about this camp. It's about getting you 2 or 3 or 4 extra years on your career. And, you know, if you're making $60,000 a year, that's an extra $250,000.
Yeah.
And that's bad. Like, if you're 35 and you're still only making that kind of dough, we did this wrong.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah, for sure.
that's the thing is you're never going to have a chance if you're so trash that you can't even get through the training camp anymore, or you can only do the bare minimum because you're so beat up physically. I mean, the sport's hard enough on them physically with them getting kicked and punched and twisted and everything torqued all the time. You have to make them as least damage as possible early in their career while you're slowly accruing training volume and training age and developing skill so that they're not just trashed when they're 30.
I honestly feel like my 80% of what I'm doing there is actually fixing dysfunction so that they can actually train, you know.
I believe it because I look at your stuff, I follow your Instagram, and every time you post training stuff, I'm like, yes, dude, like yes, like this is what a lot of these athletes need because like they're gonna go and they're gonna fight in an hour and a half. They're gonna go have a fist fight with somebody who's a trained killer, and if you go crush them more, you're still great 8 weeks from now, but you're gonna take years off their career.
Definitely, I appreciate that too.
But you got to be careful with all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, for the joints, like since you mentioned them, is there a way that, you know, as if let's say somebody wasn't, you know, technically sound all that time and they did waste the joints, do the joints have kind of like a tire, like it has a lifetime of wear on it, or are there ways if they get the proper information from people like you that they can, you know, help their joints improve, or you know, it's too far gone or something like that?
Well, so I'll answer this in 2 ways. Part number 1 is the joints, the ligaments and tendons are not supposed to be absorbing a tremendous amount of load anyways. So if the joints are accepting all this load, it's because you're not moving well or you're not activating things properly. The muscle is supposed to be doing the work. So if you're having joint pain, this tells us that you have, movement dysfunction. You know, again, outside of, my elbow hurts because I got arm barred like hell. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. But if it's sort of like, my knee always bugs me every time we do plyos or something, that means we're probably not loading properly and we've got movement quality to improve. But the second thing, though, is, you know, even that being said, eventually after 10 years, 15 years of training twice a day for most of the year, there's a time frame on that. There's a window where that's going to run out and your body's going to say, like, you know, we're done here, because like we always say about, like we just joke about in the sport of weightlifting, like weightlifting is great for your health until you start competing in it. You know, like jiu-jitsu is the same way. Jiu-jitsu is fantastic. Jiu-jitsu would almost single-handedly solve the obesity epidemic in America until you start competing.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Especially when you're trying to compete for a world championship. Like, let's not fool ourselves in thinking that that's an optimal health training strategy.
Right.
I mean, you know the price you're paying, and even you probably feel that, never even getting to that level, but getting to it enough where you're like, yeah, okay, I'm paying for some of that now.
Well, I mean, even into to the point of that is like I had to actually retire due to concussions. So, you know, it got to that point there, but I understand what you're saying completely. I mean, once you go into absolute and you're trying to get to the top level of everything, I mean, I guess physical health becomes an issue because you're pushing yourself to the max every day. So yeah, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah, and you try to reduce that as much as you possibly can. And there are strategies like we're talking about, but there's still some point where, you know, the work has to be put in, and you're just running up next to that risk so often that you're going to step off the edge sometime, and then you come back way too fast a lot of times because you have to eat, right? In this sport, you don't fight, you don't eat. So it's not like the NFL where you got that contract, you're getting your money either way. Like, you know, fuck this. You don't fight, you don't eat. So
yeah,
it's a tough one.
In that, you know, the same aforementioned guest spot on Barbell Shrugged, you were on the episode about busting myths. I was extremely fascinated because I don't have the knowledge you and Phil have, so I was fascinated on this explanation that you had of what lactic acid is all about. Could you now blow our listeners' minds with that breakdown, and why the idea of lactic acid being a key cause of fighter fatigue may not necessarily be as true as many MMA fans think?
Yeah, I'm actually glad that the word is starting to finally get out on this. Enough people heard that episode that I did maybe 3 years ago now. But then I'm certainly not the one to invent this. So, I mean, I learned about this from the work from the 1980s. So people have known this for long before me. And now I've seen it pop up everywhere, and people are talking about it, and I see posts on Instagram all about it. So it's finally getting out there. In fact, I think I finally just heard Joe Rogan say this.
Yeah, he's the one that keeps bringing it up. He keeps on talking about lactic. It's all on him.
Yeah, I think he's finally got it figured out. I heard him say the other day, and got to get away from it. It's like, oh, great. But yeah, that's. I mean, the quick answer is when your body uses two main macronutrients for fuel. For the most part, it's fat or carbohydrate. And when it uses fat for fuel, it's 100% uses oxygen, so it's totally aerobic. And it's actually a fairly efficient metabolic system, so there's not a lot of waste products. When you use sugar, though, for fuel, it's either going to result in either lactate or lactic acid, and the details between those two are not important right now, or it's going to eventually make alcohol in a kind of separate process. But what you have to do is, in order to fully metabolize or finish breaking down that carbohydrate or that sugar molecule, it has to actually go through aerobic systems, which is why, like we talk about here, even an anaerobic athlete still needs to have an aerobic background, because even though you're using carbohydrate or sugar for your anaerobic performance, you're using your aerobic side to finish that, or in other words, to recover. So what lactate really is when you break down that first part of the carbohydrate for fuel, if there's oxygen around, it gets metabolized and it's fine. But if there's not oxygen around, it kind of does this like short like holdover thing where it's like, okay, well, we'll just hold this in place as lactate for now. And what that actually does is it actually makes you become less acidic. Now, I could go through the full chemistry on it, and it actually makes a ton of sense, and it's actually very, very easy to understand, but for the sake of time, I won't do it right now. But yeah, like you heard me correctly, that stuff makes you less acidic. It stops those things from happening, and then because it is basically, I'm skipping some steps here, but you're getting the idea here. Yeah. That because lactate is actually a a partially broken down sugar, it is a tremendously effective fuel source. So what basically happens is you use these carbohydrates or sugar for fuel, and then you don't have enough aerobic or oxygen around, so you kind of hold it as lactate, and then as soon as you have enough oxygen around, you convert that lactate right back into sugar and then use it for fuel.
So is that the reason why, like, you'll hear, the lactic excuse with people, that's why they get tired. So is that maybe why people that have a really good cardio or lung capacity, because they're building and bringing oxygen, or at least using oxygen better in their body, they don't have the quote-unquote lactic acidosis issue?
Yeah, so you have a couple of things. This is a great example of causation versus correlation or association. Mm-hmm. So absolutely, the amount of lactate goes up with the amount of fatigue, no doubt. And so people then assume that's the problem. It's not the problem. It's trying to be the solution. So it realizes you're becoming acidic, and so it's increasing its level to try to manage all the acid. Right. So that's really what's happening. But the reason I don't really go too crazy about it is because the point is being made that you're super tired.
Right.
So who really cares if we're using the right term? It's not that. We've got some other causes that we think are really the culprits, but like fatigue is one of those fun things where we still don't have a damn clue what actually causes fatigue. Yeah. Like we don't really know. We know for sure it's not lactate. Yeah. In fact, lactate is, again, a very powerful fuel and a bunch of other things. But if you're commentating for the UFC, and who really cares? It doesn't really matter. Only jerks that have PhDs in metabolism like me are like, that's not lactate. Whatever. Point is, like, I'm gassed and I'm gonna throw up. Like, who gives a crap? That's really the deal with I would encourage you on my website. I threw up a bunch of videos for free where I break down and I have graphics and show you exactly what lactate is if you want. And one of them is less than 5 minutes long, and the other one is like a half an hour if you want to get really crazy. You can check those out, or I will give you the guy's name, George Brooks, out of Cal Berkeley, who's done a lot of work in this area. If any of your listeners want to really go scientific into it, he's the scientist really behind lactate.
And your website, Doctor, it's andygalpin.com, right? For anybody listening that wants to check out. Okay.
Yeah, it's free too. Everything's up there is free. No email list, nothing to sign up for. Just all free.
Yeah. So Andy, let's talk a little bit about some recovery methods now. I've seen in other podcasts that you are not too big of a fan of ice baths. Is that true?
No. So like anything else, you have to understand how we're implementing them and what time. So for example, right before I was done with you guys, I got off the phone with Dennis, and he's like, I'm feeling amazing, and he was using a lot of ice bath this week.
Okay.
So it depends on the context. So I'll even go a little bit bigger. What we have to understand is like there's so much we don't know, especially about recovery, that I give I make full excuse to change my mind here in 6 months or 6 years.
Yeah.
Like, cause we just don't know. We've just started to study these things. And I don't mean me personally, but just the field in general.
Yeah.
So we have to be willing to admit ignorance, and we have to be willing to be like, hey man, I was wrong about this, and let's not do this. But the way that the data stands right now looks like this. You have to ask yourself as a coach, and this is actually a huge problem with MMA because, your guys are lucky to have you down there, but a lot of MMA people don't have a central head coach. They don't have a year-long plan. They just they show up, they go to class, and they go to the coaches, and then they schedule a fight, and then they train harder for 8 weeks, and then they fight, and then rinse, repeat. And that's why they break down. There's no true year plan. There's no logic in place. But really what you have to ask yourself is, am I trying to do one of two things with my athlete right now? Am I trying to induce or cause an adaptation? Or am I trying to peak their performance? And we all should understand that you cannot do those both at the same time. If I'm peaking, I'm not improving, I'm physiologically. And if I'm doing the opposite's not happening.
Yeah.
So here's what it looks like right now. If you ice bath, especially if you do it right after training, we know that the preliminary data suggests that blocks a lot of the adaptation signal. Because you just did all this training, you got a lot of oxidative stress, you got a lot of inflammation, which people think is bad, but there is no adaptation without inflammation. It's your body's signal to recover, repair, to change something. So if you block that system by having a bunch of anti-inflammatories, like icing and other things, then your body doesn't even realize it's been challenged. It's not going to adapt. So specifically, if you do a hard, particularly like a lifting bout, and you jump in an ice bath, you're going to potentially block the signal that tells your genes to start replicating and start to growing new DNA. So it's probably not good for growing muscle mass. Wow. And so then everyone was like, okay, don't ice bath, don't ice bath, don't ice bath. Yeah. And then data came out and it was like, well, it looks like actually it's pretty good for causing what's called mitochondrial biogenesis, which means you grow more mitochondria, which is one of the most important factors for aerobic endurance.
Conditioning.
Yeah. And so we're like, shit, I guess we do ice now. But that's what I'm talking about. We know that it reduces inflammation. We know that anaglycically, it feels good. You feel better. Things don't hurt anymore. You got joint inflammation. So I think it's very short-sighted to just say, do it or don't do it. What you have to do, I think, is plan out. Let's just say, for example, so we can get very, very specific. You got a fighter who just signed a fight 8 weeks out. Well, you have to decide. Generally the people at the level that you're working with and I'm working with, even the last 8 weeks, it's not really a time to challenge adaptation. You're really just kind of getting ready for that fight because they're already at a pretty high level. And now you're just getting those last little bit of timings and strategy and, getting fit, and then you're kind of off.
Yeah.
So you might decide, look, weeks 1 and 2, we're not going to ice. So your body is getting challenged. You're going to be overloaded a little bit. And that means you're not going to recover as well. But then weeks 3, 4, and 5, maybe we'll start icing. We're not driving adaptation then, but you're going to recover well. Maybe week 6, whatever. I'm just making up numbers.
Sure.
Go off of it. But then the last 10 days, this ice, because who cares? You're not going to improve your conditioning the last 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
But you can definitely improve your recovery and start feeling better and feeling fresh. And so however you design your 8 weeks, I mean, I don't know how you guys always do it, but that point when you're sort of like, hey, we need a back off week, well, now maybe you start inducing or start putting in the ice bath. The other thing you have to understand is what time of the day that you do the ice bath really matters too. So, if you do an ice bath in the morning and then you have a drill session at night, that's totally different than sparring 5 rounds, at 11 in the morning, then hopping in an ice bath. That's going to cause completely different physiological adaptations. So I am actually a huge fan of the ice baths, just depending on how you use them, what the goal is. But you can't answer any of those questions unless you step back all the way and gone, like, what's the plan here? What's the plan for today, for this week, for this 8 weeks, this month? What's the plan of this athlete's career for the year? Like, is this a 35-year-old athlete like King Mo? Well, you know what? I'll probably ice bath a little bit more.
Yeah.
So you have to just really put all of that stuff in context. And then it gets even more difficult because then people ask you things like, well, can I just do cryotherapy instead of ice bath? And the data suggests that those are not the same thing at all.
Wow.
So I can't say bad, good, or worse. It's not the same thing, and we just don't have very much information on them, especially with the kind of athletes that we're talking about. So
would you feel it's personal preference from a cold bath to cryotherapy, or is it really just doesn't matter? There's not enough evidence to really state a difference?
Yeah. For the things that the people that we work with are concerned about, the preliminary data suggests that the ice bath is going to be more effective.
Sure.
I think for the average person, the average exerciser or worker outer and things like that, probably a little bit of personal preference. But having said that, you know how this goes, man. Sometimes they're like, I'm not getting that ice bath. And you're like, all right, how about the cryotherapy? Okay, I'll do the cryotherapy. Okay, cool. So it doesn't mean never do it. And if that's the way that they get used to ice, and so eventually they go, oh, okay, I'm ready to get in the ice bath now. It's probably better than nothing. But for the type of stuff we're generally looking for, the ice bath looks to be the better thing. So, and all the way up to the neck. Don't do none of this like only up to the rib cage thing. Like get down there.
Yeah, definitely. My situation is pretty unique over there at American Top Team, but we'll talk a little bit more, offline about some things that I want to talk to you about, especially when it comes to recovery. But how do you feel about like contrast baths? So, hot and cold, things like that.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, we have almost no data on that at all. Like scientifically, we don't know. So at this point, I have to say, what has your experience been?
Yeah.
What are people that have done it? Because we just don't have hardly any science on it. We use that stuff a lot. But I wouldn't use it for the sake of necessarily like recovery, other than a few short things. So you might go, hey, cold, a little hot, cold, a little hot, just to kind of break it up. But I think that is better applied as almost an actual training session than anything else. So get really, 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 really hot, and then get really, really cold, and then really, 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 really hot, really cold. That's not how most people use the contrast bath. Most people use it as like kind of cold. Warm up for a few minutes. Kind of cold. Warm up for a few minutes.
Yeah. So what we usually do, what I usually tell the athletes would be, a minute on in, almost freezing cold water, and then 30 seconds of, hot. And we just kind of do that for 6 rounds. From an experience standpoint, we've had nothing but good results with it, but it's all subjective and it's never absolute, like anything really.
Yeah, totally. But that's what we used to do too when I was in at Athletes Performance in Tempe, 15 years ago or whatever with the NFL guys. That's what we did.
Sure.
And that was also because, dude, they weren't going to stay in the cold pool for any longer than that.
Yeah, definitely.
There's no way. I would probably bump it up a little bit longer and go maybe like 2 minutes cold, and, a minute hot or something. But whatever, man. If they feel good, dude, if they feel good, go for it. Like, I'm just guessing like you are, so don't act like I got any more expertise on that than you do.
No problem. All right, so here we go. So, working with these athletes and fighters now, what do you see from a professional standpoint that coaches are doing wrong in the MMA strength and conditioning world?
So, like, honestly, the number one thing that I see is they don't listen to the actual athlete, which is crazy. Now, I'm not like you. I'm not in the weight room every day with the athletes. Most of the people that I work with are actually lifting in the gym with PJ Nessler. I don't know if you've connected with PJ, but
I definitely need to, man. I've seen him a lot, and I definitely need to for sure.
Yeah, you guys I think you guys would hit it off. You guys are both doing good stuff, but so he's the guy who's really doing it. And honestly, it's been since we met PJ and brought him on board. Like I don't even go to have most of their training sessions, or if any, anymore, because he's so rock solid. So I do stuff like behind the scenes, but the number one thing that I've seen with other folks is like they're not listening to the athletes. When the athlete tells them, I don't want to do this anymore, or this isn't working for me, just so many strength coaches like, I'm a strength coach, like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And you're like, yes, I know that probably is better, but if the athlete doesn't want to do it, remember, you work for them. Like you're there. And the other biggest mistake that I see the strength coaches making is not understanding their role in the team. Now, that part of that is because the athlete sometimes doesn't define that, but if it's King Mo's camp, like it is Team King Mo. It is not Team you and King Mo. Like,
yeah, definitely.
you are in that Team King Mo, and if he wants you to be 28th on the pecking list, dude, you're 28th. And you need to be happy about that. Like, not be like, God damn it, like how can I get my weight one up? Like, how can I show him I want to be in the corner. I want to walk him out there. Why isn't he picking? Who cares? Like,
I do see that a lot with some coaches. I'm not gonna name names, but I definitely see that a lot, man.
Yeah, man. Like I used to I'll go like I'm not in New York right now. I got Pat and Dennis there, and I couldn't make it out there. But like I'll go out there when they ask or when I can. But I'm not trying to be like, dude, hey, you got my ticket this time? Like every single fight, like. Oh
man, yeah. That's the thing. It's like you want to be there, but like at the same time, I'm not gonna push my fighters to be like, hey man, so give me a ticket, give me a flight, and this and that, So I understand.
Because they will a lot of times, like, and most of the times they do, right? They're like, I want you out there because I want you to warm up for whatever. But sometimes they don't have the money or it's whatever. I've also seen this a lot too, where it's like they get within the last couple of weeks, like 2 weeks before the fight, and they're like, oh, well, I don't want to lift the next 2 weeks. So like, thanks a lot, coach, but I'll see you when the fight's over. And dude, it may not be a good idea, but you have to be like, cool, like, yeah, man, no problem. Absolutely, man. Like this is, you cannot put extra stresses on them about you getting your glory and you trying to be famous because you're somebody's strength coach. Like that person's famous because they're the one taking the head kicks, not you.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I appreciate that from coming from you, because a lot of people need to hear that, for being an ex-fighter and being an ex-athlete in that sport, we these guys go out there and they put themselves on the line, and you get a lot of bottom feeders that try to just, nitpick and try to get with those guys that aren't really doing much for them. They just want to be with them so they can get that little bit of fame. And I see it constantly, and it may not just be coaches, it may be managers and even like cousins and shit like that. Like people, like, come on, man, So I do see that. I had the opportunity to go to Vegas for UFC 213, but that was to work on one of my fighters before a fight. So it was mainly to help them out and to help another fighter that I had there that wanted to train with me while I was in town. So I mean, it worked out well.
Yeah.
But dude, if I didn't go to that, it wouldn't make no difference.
Exactly. Like all my guys and girls know, like if they say the word, I'm there.
Yeah.
Like no questions asked. But I'm never gonna be the one to be like they'll know. Like, do you want me to come out? No, I'm good. Okay, cool, man, great. Like, no problem.
Yeah.
But like, here's a good example. Like, John Jones is fighting out here next week, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who John Jones, the strength coach, is?
I do not. Who is?
See, that's my point. Like, that's my whole point.
Exactly.
You can be John Jones, the strength coach, and I know who it is. He's Lawrence. He's great. He's an awesome guy, and he's super sharp, and he's a friend. But that's my point. Is like, you're never gonna get famous as the strength coach. Like, and you shouldn't.
No.
There's so many of these guys. Like, I just found out who you were, whatever it was, a year ago, something. I'm like, man, how did I not do it? Okay. And all these people pop up because you're not going to get famous as a strength coach, and you shouldn't. You're not the one putting it on the line. Like, you're there for a few hours a day, and you are very helpful, and you're very important, and a lot of fighters really care.
Yeah.
And a lot of them will do things like, when they can afford it, they'll kick back money, and when they'll do other things they can, they'll put you up, they'll support your sponsor, they'll use their platform to get you stuff, or they'll just generally be like thankful. But if you're doing it because you think you're going to get famous off it, man, the guys who are the most famous athletes in the world still don't know who their strength coaches are because it's not important.
No. Yep, I hear you.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions fighters have about their bodies when they first come to you for advice and training? I mean, or maybe just what they've got in their head from previous coaches, and what kind of stuff like that.
So that's a really good question, because that's what I do more than anything. It's like, I get phone calls and like, hey, things aren't going right. Like, here's everything. What do I do? Because the biggest ones that I get most frequently are, number one, they're young, they're 28, and they're like, hey, this isn't working anymore. Mm-hmm. And we have to tell them, yeah, well, it wasn't working. You were 23, but you were getting away with it. Now you actually have to approach this like a professional. I mean, you guys know, but some of the listeners would be super surprised about how unprofessional a lot of these folks are.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they just show up and fight and practice, and then that's it. Yeah. It's like, do you know what it's like? I mean, I've worked with NFL players, NBA players, Major League Baseball players. You know what their days are like? Well, it ain't like what yours is like. And don't let that money be the excuse. I mean, I know you can't pay 2 professional masseuses to fly around with you and stuff, but like, do you wake up all day and your whole goal is your physical body, and that's your focus for the day? Because if not, then you're not a professional athlete. If you're not spending 12 hours a day on your body, or whatever the number is, like I spend on my job, how dare you call yourself professional because you fight once every 8 weeks and you get a paycheck? I don't know any professionals that work an hour and a half a day and call themselves a professional.
Yeah. That's you know what, that's funny, because that's one thing that our head coach Dean Thomas and Conan Severio always talk about, man. If you have a side job, if you have a part-time job, you're not considered a professional, especially in what we're doing at our gym, where mainly we cater to high-level fighters. So I mean, if you're not spending that 120% of the time of getting better from a physical standpoint, then you're not really a professional. So I understand that.
No, and it's not that, like, I get it income-wise. I mean, all of our guys, even UFC guys and girls, are struggling financially. But it's sort of like, okay, what could you be doing on your break? Like, oh, you're not watching videos. Why are you not watching instructional DVDs? Why are you not working on breathing? Why are you not working on your mobility? Why are you not taking all these extra things? Oh, we got an extra half an hour today? How about we do some extra, foam? Whatever it is you can do, you can watch another tape. You could watch another fight. You could, like, if you were in the NFL and you showed up to an hour-and-a-half practice and you didn't watch tape and you didn't do any of these things, like, you'd be fired immediately, and your teammates would not want to be a part of your team. They're like, this guy is not a professional. What is he doing? Like, and if you don't have the money, fine. Like, there's this, but there's ways around it. So that's the biggest thing. And then the other stuff, the other big category I have to get through their heads for the most part is that there's no free passes with physiology. Like, everyone wants a hack. Like, I want a nutrition hack. I want a training hack. Like, they just don't exist to get to the level that you want to get to. So there is no, like, oh, I want to do this magic retreat. I'm going to do this awesome, like, this supplement thing or this, like, that's not how we got there. That's not how Daniel Cormier got to where he's at, is because of that stuff. Like, this is just not how you get to be the best, and how you get to be the best and stay on top until you're 40, like he is, or whatnot. So Like all that other little crap that you're worried about, that's the wrong stuff to be worried about. Like, are you eating real food? No, you're not. Okay, then why are we worried about all this other garbage? Like, this is the stuff we need to get squared away. Are you moving well? No, you're not. Do you understand how to control your diaphragm? No, you don't. I mean, what are we wasting our time for? Like, this is all nonsense until we get some of the basics down, because you will never develop and you'll never have the infrastructure to have a long career if you don't do this stuff.
Since you have such a deep knowledge of the skeletal and muscle structure, what is your evaluation process for a fighter before camp? And, how does it differ from other coaches in, strength and conditioning?
The vast majority of the people that I work with are online. In fact, I don't even know what percent, but a very significant percentage of the fighters that I work with, I've never even met in person. So it's a two-part answer. Number one, those folks, like, I don't actually have my hands on them. So we have to do a bunch of different things creatively, or more importantly, what I do, and this actually sort of goes back to one of your earlier questions about like the mistakes that strength coaches make, is what I do is I reach out to their actual coaches and be like, hey, so-and-so has reached out for me. She has said that, she wants me to help the camp or whatever. What can I do? Like, I jump in acting like I'm the dead man on the totem pole. Like, I am bottom last. Like, what are you all doing? What can I help? What do you not want me to talk about? What do you not want me to mess with? What's her issues or whatever? That's what I start off with. And if they already have a good physio or a good somebody that has movement skills and stuff, they have a good strength coach, then I don't broach those areas unless the coach comes at me and goes, she's been really dealing with this groin issue for the last 6 months. We've tried this and this and this. What do you think? Then I'll put my 2 cents in. Gotcha. But, like, I'm not going to just jump in and be like, hey, you've never met me, but I'm this dude, and this is how we're going to run the whole camp. Like, that's just really arrogant, because the coach is probably going to be like, you're an idiot. You don't know this person's athlete, whatever. But if it's a person that I'm down here, the first thing I do is I go to as many of their practices and sparring sessions as I can. And I don't do anything until I've just seen them, how they move, because, there's a bunch of movement pattern stuff that I do, and there's like mobility screening stuff that I like, but how they actually move when they're on my table versus how they move when they're in sparring, those are both important. So that's what I do. And then now that I work with PJ, I just basically say, PJ, like, here's what I saw, or this is what I've identified. And almost always he's like, yeah, we saw that when we were doing this training session or whatever. And then I don't have to say anything because he just handles the whole thing. And like I said, now we're so dialed with so many athletes we've had for so many years. It's like, I don't even have to deal with that anymore. So, I guess maybe my best answer to that should have just been like, find people that know what you're doing better than you. And there's your answer.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's always good to connect, like I said, with people that are on the same level, if not smarter than you, to actually help you out in some ways, I always like to have, a physio on hand or something along the lines of that. So when I go to do my assessments, if I don't know something or I see something wrong and I just cannot fix it, I can go to the next person, the clinician, wherever we need to do to get this athlete ready to go. That's a good thing that you and PJ have going on, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just like the conversation earlier, the mistakes with the strength coach. Like, you have to put the ego down, man. Yeah. And yes, I know movement pretty damn well, and I think I can see just about everything and all this stuff, but I don't ever hesitate to be like, well, I'm not sure, or what do you think, or what are your thoughts, or what are your thoughts? I call other chiros. We have people come in, and we just, because what's more important, I would much, 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 much rather be wrong and have that fighter get the right advice or the right treatment they need than me be right 17 times in a row, but the 18th time I cost somebody a fight.
Sure.
Yeah. Or make them pull out of a fight, which is their whole income. So it's just not important enough for me to be like, yes, I was right, for them to lose a fight because we couldn't get something fixed, or for them to have a surgery and be out 9 months because I wasn't willing to ask other people. So that's the biggest thing, man. It's like, movement's complex, people are complex. Why not get 2 or 3 opinions? Like, it's just, there's no harm in doing that.
Oh,
You could probably even speak to this too. Like, I've been wrong a lot for sure I've said wrong things and given wrong advice and did the wrong thing. And I've never in my life had an athlete not want to work with me anymore because of that.
No, that's definitely true, man. I look back at some things, and even because I also have my own private facility and I train, general pop. And I've done things as a young kid that I'm like, why the hell did I do that shit? But now, of course, nobody really got hurt or injured, thank God. But like, at the same time, every athlete that I've had that, even though I look back and like, oh man, it really doesn't match what they're trying to do. But they love the training. They love the art of how I approach what we were doing. And, it never was something of like, oh man, I fucking hate this guy. You know what I mean? So, but it definitely, I understand what you're saying.
I don't think any athlete I think that's one big fear that strength and conditioning coaches, or even just young athletes or young coaches, have, is that if you admit guilt or if you admit being wrong or incompetence in front of an athlete, that they're going to lose all trust in you and then you'll never get an athlete again. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to be able to do that. I've had that. I've done it. You've done it, I'm sure, in front of, like, made mistakes with major competitions coming up. Yeah. And then had to been like, dude, you know what? That was me. Like, that was, I was wrong. And every single time, that's not happened often, but it has happened. I don't want to sound too incompetent here. And always they've been like, oh, it's all good, man. I just appreciate actually all the years that you've been right. Like, for the 700 times you've been right. Mm-hmm. Cool. And they actually they appreciate it when you admit that wrong, because they know that actually he just cares about me getting it right and he's not here for him. And they're much more likely to actually cling to you for a longer time because they know that you're going to do what's in their best interest. Yeah. And the same thing when I say, man, I don't know here, like, even though this is my job, quote unquote, like, I'm going to call 2 or 3 other people because I want to make sure for sure you're getting the right advice. And they've never come back and go like, man, I guess you don't know what you're doing then, do you? Yeah. Like, I've never had that happen. So that's a big fear that I don't think coaches have to have, is don't be afraid to be like, man, I don't know how we should do this. What should we do? I'm going to call my friend, or I'm going to call somebody else. Don't be afraid of that.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we went longer than expected. But the knowledge you've given the listeners, and especially myself, just amazing. Now, we mentioned AndyGalpin.com, that anybody listening can go and see a lot more of your information, the free videos, all this kind of stuff. Is there anything else you'd want to promote in terms of, social media or, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, any other things you like people to know about so they can check you out and learn more from you there?
Yeah, sure. My Instagram and Twitter is just Dr. like Dr. Andy Galpin. So you can go there. I have a book that just came out 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Hold on. Tell us a little bit about your book real quick.
So it's a book basically that me and a guy named Brian McKenzie wrote, which is called Unplugged, Evolving from Technology to Upgrade Your Fitness, Performance, and Consciousness.
Nice.
So what it is a guide to how to and how not to use fitness and training technologies.
Okay.
So everything from how heart rate monitor or HRV or any of these things can screw you up, and how that can actually enhance performance.
Okay. Awesome.
So that came out on Amazon. It's #1 new release on Amazon right now. So
nice. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so it's doing pretty well, and well, hopefully it'll sell some copies.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure I get on that real quick. Do you have an audio book, by the way? Because I drive. I'm driving.
You just don't want to read, Phil. Just say that.
So here's the deal with that.
I really don't play.
I'm glad you asked that question, because that's the #1 question, and we do not have audio for 2 reasons.
Why is
that? The whole point of the book is to teach you how to use and not to use technology, and it sort of goes against the grain of the book.
I hear you, man. I hear you.
#2,
when you're driving 10 hours a week, I'm spending more time in my car. It's easier for me to do that. But for you, I'll go ahead and get the book, and I will read the book.
Yeah. So here's the second reason. It's we spent a lot of time with a lot of the photos in there. And there are charts. There's a training program in there. There's how to do things in there, and it just those don't go well over audio. And part of the experience of the book is the photos, and it's a very, even a dum-dum like yourself can read it pretty fast.
Oh, wow.
It's an easy read. Most people have been reading it in one day. They've been sitting down, like, reading it in a day or two. So
Yeah, definitely. All right.
I think you can get through it.
Phil, your social media for people listening, so they always want to know.
Yeah, Instagram, Daru Strong. My Twitter's Daru Strong, and Snapchat, Daru Strong 1. I also have to shout out 8 Man Strong Clothing, Apparel. They've been hooking me up, all my fighters up with some gear. If you want to go check them out, you can check them out on Instagram at 8 Man Strong and their website, 8manstrong.com.
I want some gear. 8 Man Strong, hook me up with some gear too.
You got to get strong first, buddy.
Oh, damn. All right. Everybody also don't forget Facebook. You can find the Fight Strength Podcast page and follow us there. We put up new videos. You can always see a lot of new videos from Phil. He posts them there, and he's training with the recently Tyron Willie, which is great. Also, you can find us on Twitter, FightStrength_. And that is our show for tonight. Thank you again so much, Andy, for being on. I know your time is valuable. I really appreciate it. I'm Jason Burgos, our guest doctor, Andy Galpin. He is Phil Daru. See you guys next time.